Well, somebody that's been with New Life quite some time is Dr. Henry Cloud. And he is the only person on the planet that calls me Stevie, because we have a great relationship and we've loved being in each other's presence. I have to tell you that I am twice as wise as I would have been if I had never done radio with Henry. I'm not saying I'm as wise as Henry. I'm saying I'm twice as wise as I would have been if I hadn't been exposed to his teaching over and over again. It is a blessing, and I know it's blessed you. And so I wanted to, as we've done on each one of these, help you get to know the hosts a little bit better. I wanted to interview him. I did. And Henry, thanks for joining us for a little Club New Life revelation here.
Good to be here, Steve.
All right, tell everybody you were born in the South, deep South.
Mississippi.
And you had, I believe you had a problem with your legs. Was that your first challenge?
Yeah, when I was a little short of my 4th birthday, one day at Sunday school, I started having severe pain in my left hip. And from there it got worse. And I was in a hospital for, I think, like a month or two, and they couldn't figure it out. And see, this is kind of an interesting story. I don't know if you wanted this long of an answer, but it's really interesting. They couldn't figure it out, what was going on. And I went to an appointment. I got out of the hospital, and then my mom took me to the hospital again because they were having an appointment to discuss, as I understood it, amputation. And they were waiting in the waiting room, waiting. The doctor never came. My mother said that she heard a voice that told her, leave and take him to New Orleans, which to her meant a certain hospital in New Orleans.
Yeah.
She drives 200 miles, goes and gets my dad, drives 200 miles, checks me into Ochsner's Clinic, big teaching hospital in New Orleans. I am randomly assigned to a new orthopedic surgeon who had just moved there from Chicago, who had studied under the 2 men that had discovered how to treat the disease I had. She diagnosed it in 5 minutes and said, I know how to treat this. He'll be fine. And I was in braces and crutches for wheelchairs for
so cool.
A couple of years. But it was a divine intervention.
That's really neat.
And God led my parents to the one doctor that could have figured it out.
Not a coincidence. Okay. So when did you accept Christ?
Probably from early on. And I don't even, sort of like I grew up in a Methodist church, and I think I just always believed in him, but it was at a camp that I really understood it. Somebody told that story about, God pays the ticket for you.
Yeah.
And that's when I kind of got it.
But
I really didn't fully kind of sell out until college.
Okay. You went to SMU.
Yeah.
In Dallas, and was it there that you determined you wanted to spend your life helping people with emotional, mental issues? Okay. And
about halfway through college.
All right. And then you finished up. Where did you get your graduate degree?
I finished at SMU, and then I took a year off because I wanted to make sure this is what I wanted to do. And I went to work in a psychiatric hospital there in Dallas that happened to be the hospital where Frank Minirth and Paul Meyer had all of their stuff going on.
What was the name of that hospital?
Richardson Medical Center.
Okay.
And so I was a $3 an hour orderly, but I got to work with Frank and Paul and ended up co-leading groups with them and just had a great year there where it kind of formed the future in some ways. And then I left there to go to graduate school, and I went to Rosemead Graduate School, which is part of Biola University, where Talbot is. And so I took off to L.A. and didn't know anything about, and it was a mystical experience then. Also, I was going to go to either Southwestern Medical School there in Dallas or Baylor, or I was looking at a couple other schools in the South, and I just happened to apply to Rosemead, and because it was Christian and I was kind of interested, and I went to the interview. They sent people out on the road to interview you, and I went to the interview, no inclination to go to California whatsoever, and without going into it, I had a mystical experience in that interview. And all I know to tell you is it was one of those moments, and I left that interview not understanding what had happened, except I knew I was going to California.
Very cool.
And then I did my internship at LA County.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to fast forward, and you're going to tell everybody, I think you will, what are the loves of your life?
The loves of my life.
The loves of your life.
Well, it's, it's sort of like the kid where the teacher says, "What's gray and has a bushy tail and lives in a tree?" And he goes, "Well, I'll say Jesus, but it sounds like a squirrel."
Yeah.
Obviously, God is
Yep.
the first love of my life, but my wife Tori and our kids, Olivia and Lucy, and then from there, extended family and circle of friends, I think there's no way to measure.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of everything else after that. It's sort of I love my work. It always changes, and I'm doing always different kinds of facets, but it's always in the same direction of trying to figure out the issues of growth, whether that's clinically or performance-wise for leaders or wherever it is we do what we do.
Yeah.
But I love all of that, and then I have some hobbies that I love as well.
Golf would be a hobby?
Golf and the water.
You love water.
I grew up on lakes and fishing and all duck hunting and all that, and since I moved to California, now it's the ocean and scuba diving and deep sea fishing.
If you're too far from water very long, you start to shake and stuff, don't you?
I do. I get really weird.
I bet.
Weirder, I should say.
Well, in your life,
we've been scuba diving together.
Yes, we have.
We've been in some scary situations.
Don't want to relive that. Oh my
I
goodness!
remember that.
Goodness gracious, how cold was that water? Well, in your life, there have been struggles. What would you say would be a struggle you could share? I mean, people might say, "Oh, well, he's just had such a perfect life," but there.
I don't know who they're talking about.
But maybe you could share with something that is a struggle that you dealt with at some point in your life, and how you did that, how it helped you dealing with that struggle.
Well, I think one of the biggest ones, and I've written about this in a few books, was in college. I had gone to college really to play golf. I mean, I'd always played competitive golf, and I was looking forward to a college golf career, and I was recruited to play at a really, really good school, and then had a hand injury and just couldn't play very well. It's in pain, and it just and finally, after a couple of years, I had to quit because I literally couldn't hold on to a golf club because of the pain. And I found out at that time what it means when you have the wrong thing as your guide. I oriented my life around competitive golf, and I did not know I was really sort of a shell of a person underneath all that, but I really was, and I got really depressed. I mean, really, really depressed, and it was through that hitting bottom experience that I reached out to God, and God showed up and led me into a spiritual community that really healed me. And when I say I know what depression is, I'm not kidding. I mean, I know what it's like to literally not be able to move.
Yeah.
And
debilitating depression.
Debilitating. And I mean, I remember where, people would say, "Do you want to go do this or that?" And maybe it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks in advance. And I remember a period where I literally couldn't do a commitment because I didn't know in 3 or 4 weeks if I would be able to.
And what made the difference? How did you come out of that?
Well, I think all the kind of things we talk about, I got some good help, and I had good community, and I was learning a lot of the principles that we encourage people to get involved in. It was not instant. Yeah. It was slow as that goes.
Right.
But it was a combination of help and my relationship with God, my relationship with the community that was oriented towards growth.
Yeah. Do you ever get down now? If you do, what do you do when you get down?
Well, what kind of down do you mean?
Just, sometimes you're just either it's depression or you're tired and worn out or burned out or you're just not sparking on all the cylinders.
Yeah, certainly some of that. I kind of put it in 3 categories. I don't really, by and large, I don't get depressed anymore. Except there have been 2 times. One was...
I think I know one of these.
Which one?
When you lost your brother-in-law?
Yeah, when
I saw it.
both of my parents died within weeks almost of each other, and then 3 weeks later, Mark was killed.
Yeah,
and
neat guy.
That those three losses, and then in that year, it was it was 2008, and that's when the world fell apart as well.
Yeah.
And because of the leadership work I do, it quadrupled, because companies were crashing and people just needed a lot of that kind of leadership consulting. And I really, really was overstretched and busy and kind of didn't have the time and space to deal with those three deaths. And then the following year, I gradually did not know it, but just was getting kind of number and not interested and losing motivation and kind of didn't care about the future that much. And I'd make plans, but I didn't really, I've always been future oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And I just woke up, earlier this year, it would have been January or so, and just realized I think I'm stuck in a grief process.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to begin to go unpack it and talk it out. And it's just now, you asked me about Mark a minute ago, and it's just now that teary moments are starting to come.
Mm-hmm.
And as well about my parents, that started to happen more. But I feel different now than I did 6, 7, 8 months ago.
Mark was such a good guy. We went to the same church, and so often it's the good guy that ends up dying. How did you resolve that with God? That of all the people that would be involved in a Jeep blowing up or whatever from a roadside bomb, he would be the one that would die. How did you deal with that?
Well, when you say how do you resolve it with God, for some reason, and I don't know exactly what this is, but that's never been a sort of the burr in the saddle question for me. Now with Mark, who was a retired Navy SEAL and was asked to go back to Iraq to train, special ops forces over there, come out of retirement and go back. Mark died. Doing what he loved.
That's true. Yeah.
He loved what he did.
Yeah.
And he knew that he was rescuing people.
Mm-hmm.
In that whole world over there where children were held captive and used by terrorists and all. You read about all this stuff, but he just knew that he was freeing people.
Yeah.
And he died doing what he loved and in the service. So to me, he's a hero.
Mm-hmm.
And God has always called heroes.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes even to die.
Yeah.
And so the aftermath of that, is terrible.
Yeah.
But with community and grace and God's presence and the miracles that have come, as a result in myriads of ways, it's pain.
Yeah.
But for some reason, it wasn't a God problem in the way that, I don't know how to describe it. I just know that Mark had given his life to God.
Yeah.
And he was in God's hands, and he knew that.
Yeah. I have to tell you, when I look back over my life, there are a lot of things that I love to remember, love to think about. But there is one night that I will never forget. It wasn't any big deal, but my ex-wife had an affair. I had confronted her, and she left and filed for divorce. And I really felt like life as I knew it was over. And all I had were friends that kind of kept me going. And I remember one night you said, come get on the boat. You had a boat. And we took it over to Catalina, we spent the night out on the boat, and I don't know, Henry. It just was one of the most healing. We didn't even talk about anything. We just had fun. We laughed and giggled, and it was just one of the most healing, beautiful nights of my entire life. And
I remember that.
I can never thank you enough for reaching out when, man, it was a bad time. So I love you for that. I love you for so many other things. And you're just, you're one of the few people, I'm sorry to say, that I really admire. And I have admired you, and I have loved you and prayed for you. And of course, I love your wife more than you, but that's another story. Actually,
that's easy to do.
Tori's just an amazing person, and she is just one of my favorite people on the earth. Now, I've got to ask you something. It's a tough question, but can you remember a time when you gave someone advice, and you do a lot of it, and there are many of these, I'm sure, and you believe it really made a difference in their life?
Well, hopefully, because of what we do, Steve, hopefully it makes a difference a lot, because and I don't really, I struggle with the word advice.
Yeah.
What I think of doing is very, very much akin to where the Bible says, what happened with you? And the guy goes, well, I don't know what to tell you, but look, I was blind and now
Right.
I see, and there was this guy, Jesus, and this is what he did. And I don't think of giving advice. What I think of is that there are ways of God that are as unalterable as gravity. And they're just the ways that the universe are created.
Yeah.
And I think that when you are just sharing those ways, out of the theoretical guessing and opinions that we have to do sometimes, but when you're sharing those ways, you can just always know that it's going to help. And you might not see it in that moment. Like, I've run into people, I've had the experience, I bet you've had this experience as well, where you've dealt with a person, and maybe it's in a hospital or, some other environment, and kind of wonder what's going to happen. And 10 years later, you might be out on the road speaking, and they walk up to you and say, remember me?
Yeah.
And they'll talk about their whole life
Right.
being different because of one little principle they learned.
Yeah.
And that's the power of God's ways. And so that's what I love to think about in that whole question. It's just kind of sharing what he's given to us.
Well, I'm sure glad that you and I found our way together. I'm so glad that you work with us here, and God bless you, and thanks for sharing a little bit of yourself. Anything you want to say before we close up for these Club New Lifers?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I wanted to say that I'm grateful for you as well. I mean, we have been, I was thinking earlier, I can't remember one of the shows we were talking about this, but we first met, it would have been, I'm talking like 1980,
82 or so,
right in there.
like that.
A new church had started where Steve and I were both involved, and I was in school at the time, in graduate school, and I think you were working in the treatment center business.
Yeah, I was in private.
And we had these parallel interests, but we would always talk about someday we got to do something together.
Yeah.
And then when we really got the opportunity to do that, when New Life came together with Minnerthmeyer and all of that, one of the things I've been grateful for, besides our friendship, is just what you have brought with using your gifts to make all of this stuff work. The pulling all the pieces and the networks and all of that kind of stuff that you do so well, it makes a space for the rest of us just kind of content junkies to to hang out. But the other thing, Steve, is just the authenticity that you have just walked this path with, and just being so real. I know I can always talk to you, and I love you for that. So
one of the biggest privileges of my life is when you'll say, okay, there's nobody that's going to understand this but you, and you'll ask me some bizarre thing. I love that.
Well, you've been in certain kind of situations that I know about, right, and dealing with different kinds of people, and so.
Well, we've had some great experiences, and I appreciate you, and I'm just grateful that it all came together the way it did, and may we be doing this till we hit the deck, so that we die doing what we love.
We'll be on some geriatric cruise, right?
Yeah.
Discussing life with a few geezers somewhere.
Yeah. Some guy will roll up in his wheelchair and say, I tell you, I don't know what's wrong with me. None of these people like me.
I'm having difficulty making friends, and I'm codependent with all these other old people.
And by then, boundaries there won't be any books probably. You'll have one in your museum.
You'll think it, and it's in your head at that point.
There'll be a chip, a boundaries. Have you read the boundaries chip? Okay. All right. God bless you. Thank you. And thanks to all of you who listen to Club New Life.